Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 80 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game up to the next level. I am Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How are we doing, Rob?
You said 80, and it almost scared me.
I know, right?
I've spent over 80 hours doing this with you.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
I just didn't think about that until this very moment.
Yeah, it's like I said, it feels like first year was just yesterday, and
yeah,
that's crazy.
But we're here.
We're here.
We're healthy.
Yeah.
We've got this lovely community that listens to us and that we hope to expand every time. And
Big shout out to those on the live chat with us right now. I see Samantha poking in there, and Knox in the box said that he is tending, unfortunately, to a broken refrigerator. So
I think the word is adulting.
He's
adulting, but luckily we're recorded and it will rebroadcast. But maybe we'll see them.
Yep.
So tonight we have a considerable topic.
Yeah, it's one of those game systems that I haven't really had a lot of experience with, but I think is pretty ubiquitous now in the lately in the gaming world. And I think everybody's at least heard of it if they've not experienced it themselves, and that's the whole Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yes,
the Apocalypse World rule set. And so we wanted to do a system spotlight on it, not only to just kind of get it back out there for you guys, but also to kind of learn it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And it's big.
It's really
There's
big,
a lot of games that run into this. I mean, like, when I think of, when D20 happened, God, I was trying to think of what year that occurred, and my brain went straight to goo. It was in the, late 90s?
It was right around when I was in college, so yeah, it was either late 90s or early 2000s.
Yeah. And there was just suddenly an abundance of D20 games. Like, just an abundance.
Oh, everywhere.
Like, everybody was using the D20 license.
D20
and just
Modern,
going to nuts.
Spycraft, just
and things,
everything.
And it felt like, okay, well, everything's pretty much the same with just a different layer stacked onto it. And then I started looking at the Apocalypse games, and I was like, I know some of these, but holy jeez, there's a lot. And some of them I recognized names and didn't realize it was Powered by the Apocalypse. It was the base behind it.
Oh, yeah.
And absolutely. They are very different.
And it's amazing that they're so prolific because they were started in 2010 by McGay Baker and Vincent Baker.
Yes.
For the Apocalypse World RPG, which was their flagship product. But when you brought up the wiki for it, there was 24 games.
Yeah.
Including Apocalypse World.
Yeah.
Listed on that wiki.
It was impressive. And, like, I didn't even get to it through... I've never played Apocalypse World. Never touched it, haven't read a single book on it.
I thought you said you played Urban Shadows.
Well, I played Urban Shadows, but I've never played the base.
Oh, you've never played... Okay, I'm sorry. You've played a Powered by the Apocalypse game.
But never the Apocalypse World RPG.
So I'm glad actually that distinction gets brought up very early in the discussion, because Powered by the Apocalypse is the rules set.
It is their version of D20.
Apocalypse World is the flagship game.
Correct.
It is their D&D to the D20.
Correct.
Right.
Or Palladium Fantasy to the Palladium world to a degree.
Right.
So, but yeah, and I knew it existed, but I never touched it. Like, I had friends who had played it in the past, but, like, again, I mean, I say past, it was 2010.
Yeah, right.
But never got to it. And it wasn't until I saw Urban Shadows that I really even got a flavor into it. And now I'm seeing all these other products. I'm like, oh wait, I know that one. Like, I haven't played it, but I've heard people talking about Masks, which is the like teen superhero one.
Yeah, like Teen Titans kind of a game. Yeah. It looks really interesting. My experience with Powered by the Apocalypse is I have a copy of the Dungeon World book. I bought that a while ago, but I really have not had a chance to play it. Just between running my own D&D game is already consuming enough of my time. I am not one of those people who can run 7 different games with 17 people in them, unlike certain other of our listeners. So
yeah, and I will say this as a whole, I think Powered by the Apocalypse games,
you can do it.
I don't know if they would play well with that many players.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
And we'll get to why. Like, I think there's definitely elements, if we take a look at both of the two, because we looked at Dungeon World and Urban Shadows as our two.
Right. Now, keep in mind, too, we've had some experience with City of Mist.
Correct, but
and City of Mist is an offshoot.
Right.
It's very, but you can, if you look at City of Mist's rules, you can definitely see the core. Like,
the influence is there.
If you know Powered by the Apocalypse, you read City of Mist's rules and you go, oh, I see where they got all this from, you know. It's about a halfway step between Fate and Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yes.
But it's still you can still very much see the influence in there.
Yes.
My only other experience with Powered by the Apocalypse games was Critical Role did a one-shot of Monsterhearts.
Okay.
And it was really good.
Okay.
It was really good. It's basically high school monsters.
Okay.
So you're a monster archetype, but you're also a high school kid.
Like Monster High kind of thing?
Yeah.
Where like everyone knows everyone's a monster?
It's not that everyone knows everyone's a monster. I think you're more surreptitiously part of the community.
Oh, so it's closer to like Teenage Werewolf.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're just a normal high school student, except for the fact that you've made a pact with a demon.
Gotcha.
You know, that sort of thing.
Or, you know, under the full moon you turn into a werewolf.
Exactly.
Or whatever, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
No, I was just in anger management. You know?
Fair enough. So you dove into Dungeon World, which I have played a little.
Yeah, we kind of divided and conquered.
I think it was the better way to do it, because in all honesty, there's a lot. And I mean, they're similar because of the base core system, but it's amazing the differences between them.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's I think one of the first things I kind of want to tackle about when talking about the Powered by the Apocalypse system is, so you've got all these different games that are powered by the Apocalypse, but they're all so uniquely flavored. So what is the common thread that kind of runs through all of those?
Mm-hmm.
What is the thing that makes them powered by the Apocalypse, even though their settings and their rules may differ wildly?
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is what they refer to as the fiction. The fiction is essentially just the ongoing story.
Yes.
It's almost kind of referred to as its own character in a lot of the writing.
Yeah.
It's basically just the story being told. It stresses that this is a collaborative story, and the rules shouldn't dictate the story, but the story should dictate the moves that happen.
Which, again, we're going to use the term moves a lot in this to describe effectively actions, or, in my really personal opinion, chances.
Yeah, those are the next thing, is all these games have moves.
Mm-hmm.
So what will happen is every move has a trigger.
Yes.
And so it is just a bold bit of text at the beginning of whatever that move is that says, when this happens, do this. And that can be just something as simple as I attack the monster, which might be a lash out in violence move.
Right.
Because the trigger for that is when you use violence to damage another creature, or to damage something, might be the trigger word for it.
Right.
And so attacking an opponent is lashing out with violence to damage something.
At the same time, you're not always going to make a move, because sometimes it's not necessary. I mean, literally, if you've knocked a guy out and he's on the ground and you're going to finish him off, that's not a move.
Yeah, that's not a move.
There's no chance that you're going to screw that up. It's not even that action. It's effectively doing the same thing you have in cinematic movies where, you're walking along and there's two guards, you bang their two heads together and you walk away. They're not getting up. That's not part of the scene. There's no interest there. It's where you're going.
Right.
And in all honesty, you're not even going to do a move for the two human guards at the door when, the vampire hunter knocks their heads together. They're two humans. You're not even going to make a move for that. Now, going in the door and finding the demon standing there, turning to look at you while a ritual's going on, there's going to be some moves because nobody knows the outcomes of those actions.
Right. And, keeping in mind, too, that, basically everything that has a chance of failure like that is a move.
Mm-hmm.
So not only just lashing out in violence, but also things like I shared a secret with a friend.
Yep.
Might trigger a move that allows you to glean a secret back from them.
Yeah.
As you share an intimate moment.
Yeah, or paying a debt. Refusing to pay a debt.
Dungeon World has a bunch of them where it's when you are on a quest, you may do this.
Yeah.
When another player makes a lash out in violence move, you may
We'll get to those when we get in because they're a little different between the systems.
So, but you kind of get the feel for what moves are and how they're described. One thing that really kind of threw me off was that there doesn't seem to be any initiative system unless it is specifically written in by the game.
Yeah, rarely does it even mention like the order of how to handle things. Like I know in Urban Shadows it says when you're going around to do your debts, you start to the left of the storyteller and go around in a circle. Mm-hmm. That's the most direction you get.
I'm surprised it even has that much, honestly. It very pointedly, at least in the Dungeon World book, says there is no initiative.
Yeah.
Like, flat out. You just interject when you think your character is important. Mm-hmm. The game master or storyteller or whatever they're called in that game will just make sure that everybody is getting their due time. Mm-hmm. Those who have spoken a lot may be set aside for a little bit. Those who haven't spoken may be called on. Mm-hmm. But everybody's going to have their part, and the conversation will continue.
Yeah, and that leans into the fact that it is rules light. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no initiative. That's not important. The moves are what you're doing. There's no, like, I'm going to pick a lock, or I'm going to do charisma checks, or I need to make observations constantly.
Right.
I just have to do a room. I'm going to observe the room. No, you don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. Like, if it's there, you're going to see it. Like, let's describe what you find.
Sure. And because it is rules light, you're also going to find that, like, the books are relatively small and pretty easy to consume. Spell lists are very short.
Yeah.
Character creation tends to be picking things off of a list. You can do it in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
If you know what you're looking at.
Yeah, if you have a character concept, a lot of times the cards are very simple and literally walk you through the character creation process right on the card.
Yeah.
In a single sheet of paper.
You're playing a fighter. Okay, so you get this and this and this. Choose one of these and choose two of these.
Yep. Now,
you're done.
Work on your bonds with your group. Get the story going.
Yeah.
And that's literally it.
Mm-hmm. And bonds are the next thing.
Yep.
So even if you've admittedly a very hack and slashy dungeon world, you still have a section that describes your relationships to everybody else.
Yeah.
And those relationships are very important because resolving those relationships and moving, bringing them into the story so that they can be role-played,
right.
They can be manipulated, and they can be resolved, I suppose, is the word that they use when there's no longer a conflict in that relationship. That's when you actually mark XP. So it's actually it's a form of character advancement to have these relationships and change them and grow them with other people. And lastly, speaking of XP, failure yields results.
It does. It does.
So XP is not done like it is in many other systems in this game. Most of your XP is going to come through resolving those relationships, as well as failure. So the dice in this game are 2d6. You roll as 2d6 and typically plus something. Depending on like what game you're playing, those attributes may change. So it may, for instance, Urban Shadows has blood, spirit, mind, and body, I believe, are your 4 attributes.
I'll get into those.
But Dungeon World has your typical D&D strength,
stats,
charisma, dexterity, things like that. So you might like roll your 2d6 and add your dexterity number or something like that, or a dexterity modifier. Always, a 10 up, you get the result you're looking for. That's a good result. You have partial successes, though. 7 to 9 is typically a success with consequence, or a partial success, or maybe you get full success, but you consume a resource of something, And if you roll a 6 or under, you don't get a success at all, but what you do get is experience for it, because you learn from your failures.
Yeah, and that follows close enough with the way Urban Shadows handles its success steps and rates. 10 plus is a success with something, whereas anything underneath that is varied levels of not necessarily failure, but consequences, till the point of where you just having consequences.
Yeah, and so I like it because every time you throw the dice, something is going to happen.
It is. The situation will be resolved in some way. It's not like, nothing happened. You missed. Yep. Like that doesn't quite jive in this game. You don't miss your move so much as you miss the target number your mind wanted to hit. You know, it's the age old. You go to punch the guy, and you don't get the result you want, and so it comes to find out that you're hitting his metal face that you didn't realize was metal. Like, uh-oh.
or quite simply, you tucked your thumb in, and after nearly breaking it when you punched the guy in the face, you realize you probably did more damage to yourself than to him.
Yeah.
It smarts, and now you remember, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I've learned something today.
Yep.
Mark experience.
And that's now canon.
And that's now canon, yep.
So tell me a little bit more about Dungeon World. Why don't you lay that one out?
All right, so Dungeon World, once I sat down and actually read the rules for it, I've had this book kicking around forever, and it was really good to have this opportunity to just finally learn this game.
Really start.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot in the storyteller section. Like, most of the book is the storyteller section.
Now, I'm going to straight up say this. For a rules-light system, which is what it is, these books are packed with data. There are very few pictures.
Oh, it's very dense.
There's very few, but it explains one thing that I think a lot of the other systems don't do, is that they lean into the narrative. They lean into getting players together, and they help you a lot with getting your focus pointed on that.
Exactly. The storyteller section in this book is remarkable. And honestly, I think some of the suggestions they make for running Dungeon World are excellent for running any other game.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Dead honest. Just the standpoint of how you build a world and how you make that world react to the players. But we'll get there. So Dungeon World is, if I had to put it in a sentence, like someone wanted to play D&D but be like super chill about it.
Yeah.
It is the most relaxed D&D game you will ever play. It's very recognizable mechanics to your D&D players. So your attributes, like I said, are all the same.
Attributes, I like that.
Attributes, yes.
I like that.
Are all the same. So your strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma.
Yep.
In fact, they go on the same scale, 3 to 18.
Okay.
And you're going to glean a -3 to +3 modifier, depending on what those are. So,
right, and rarely you go above a +3, from what I'm understanding.
You need other modifiers to do it, because you simply cannot go outside of the 3 to 18.
Right.
When you create your characters, it's a standard array of points. Not the same standard array 5th edition uses, but it's its own.
It's similar.
So there's not even rolling. You just pick your stats off of a list. Races. There are elves, dwarves, halflings, and humans, I believe, are the only 4 races in here, at least in the book. And they're actually class specific, which I found a little maybe odd, because you usually don't see that sort of thing restricted. But it's very old school. It just kind of limits your choices a little bit, but you get something for it.
Okay.
For instance, like if you are a ranger, if you're playing a human ranger, you get some bonus to, I want to say it's some combat bonus you get, where when you do a certain move, it does like an extra +1 or something like that. If you're playing an elf ranger, however, when you're doing a scout move, you always succeed. Oh, nice. Okay. So
that makes sense.
You at least get a tangible benefit for having the limited choice. And then your classes are customized by choosing from a limited list of options. So your character creation can be done basically in 5 minutes. You don't really have to search through charts. Even your spell lists for the wizard and the cleric are basically 3 pages and big text. Yeah. There's maybe 5 spells per level. There's only 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 level spells.
Mm-hmm.
So skip all the even numbers, and you get a number of spells equal to your level, I think it is.
Okay.
Or something like that. But it's again very, very simple.
Mm-hmm.
So things that I think Dungeon World brings to the table that were really remarkable to me.
Okay.
And this is kind of the first thing that you see in the storyteller section.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a lot of principles that they list off.
Yeah.
Basically, things you should always keep in mind when playing this game.
Sure.
The first one is make maps, leave blanks.
I like that idea.
and I know we've said this before. Mm-hmm. We've referenced this in many world building and session building sessions. It's the very first principle that's listed, and that what that is to allow the players and the evolving fiction to fill in those blank spots for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like, okay, we're gonna head to Skull Mountain. Rob, what's something else we find along the way?
A group of worshipping dwarves.
Okay, are these worshipping dwarves worshipping in some sort of a temple? Are they just out in the field, or?
They have an exquisitely built temple.
Okay, so there's an exquisitely built temple to what god?
Actually, to the mountain itself.
To the mountain itself.
Yes.
So that's a blank spot we've left in our map
yep.
between here and Skull Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Now we filled it in.
Yep.
And we're going to have an adventure because Rob said dwarf cultists praying to the mountain.
Yep.
Cool, let's do it,
yep.
you know?
Yep. What's going on there?
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Even things like making camp for the night, dying, traveling down the road, like I said, you have like scouting moves that you need to do, are all moves. So like when you die, there is a move that says when you take your last breath, and it's how you resolve essentially what passes for death saves.
Yeah.
In Dungeon World, when you make camp for the night, that's when you can level up your character, you consume rations and stuff like that. But that's its own move.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Setting up watch is a move.
It's the thing. It's sometimes the things we don't think about, but they're definitely narrative moments.
They're part of our like your typical dungeon crawler adventure day, but
done differently.
Yeah, just kind of codified, but not in such a strict way that it becomes tactical and numerical. You know, it's become codified in a way that doesn't wring the life out of it, which I find remarkable. And then lastly, so characters only go to level 10. When you reach level 10, it's basically suggested that you retire that character.
Yeah.
Or you take on an apprentice. But with that apprentice is your new character.
Yep. It's
a level 1 character who thought that the exploits of your level 10 character were so awesome, they want to follow in their footsteps. But the story moves on, you know? We're not here to accumulate power and wealth. We're here to tell stories.
Right.
And after a certain point, you're not telling stories anymore with your level 10 character. Move them to the side. Let someone new in.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about it as a whole is that there is a definition for your character within the narrative. It's not just, I'm someone in a world, and I'm trying to figure out how I fit, and I'm trying to figure out where my part of the story connects with it. It is embedded from moment one. And even from the start points.
So what does Dungeon World do well?
Well, it feels very light and very quick.
Yes. Extraordinarily.
That you can basically just get right to the action. I remember how long it used to create. I mean, session zeros for creating characters in AD&D was downright painful at times.
Oh, it was. It was an 8-hour day at least.
Yeah, and especially if you had multiple books, and all the setting made it challenging. And then if you then needed to make any kind of background for your character, if that even meant anything, you know, depending on the storyteller, because sometimes you were just there.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't matter that you were someone of something at some place with this kind of a history. That was irrelevant. You were going into a dungeon. Now that's flipped. Now it takes you 10 minutes to make your character and 2.5 hours to build the world with your storyteller because you're playing the game to do that.
Yep. Or and really doesn't even need to take 2.5 hours to build.
Well, what I'm saying is you're in the story at that point.
Yeah, because you leave blanks. You know,
exactly.
You come up with a lot of the stuff on the fly, and that's half of the adventure is having that sort of participation in there.
Yep.
And that's, you know, so you said, you know, the rules light. It's very easy on both the player and the storyteller. But then you also have that focus on collaboration, like I mentioned, where it's very empowering to players who wish they had more say in the setting, because this is a setting in which you ask the opinions and input of the players to tell me what's going on, and then I'm there to just kind of facilitate it for you, and the fiction continues. You know?
Agreed.
So where's our stumbling blocks for Dungeon World?
The first thing that hits me is that if I'm coming from a tactical game and a tactical mindset as a storyteller, the numbers aren't there. There's no numbers to play with.
Yeah.
There's no way for me to say, is this encounter overpowering for my players? Is this, how am I to do this? And secondarily, how do I plan encounters? Period.
Yeah. It's tricky there, and it's also because everything's kind of theater of the mind's eye. There's no real rules for using miniatures. There's no rules for distances are described in vague words like long and close.
Yeah.
So what's the range on a bow? I don't know, long range.
Yeah.
Well, how long is that?
Right.
For people who need those sort of answers, Dungeon World may be a little vague for you.
Yeah.
So understandable. My big thing was that it puts pressure on the players to create their own narrative. And I know, at least at the tables that we've sat at, that has not been every player's cup of tea.
Agreed. I know a lot of players who have a hard time coming up on the fly answers. And that getting questions, even the 20 questions, the typical 20 questions that we have, challenges them and stresses them out.
What was your favorite thing tonight? I don't know.
Exactly.
I didn't really count on being called on. We did this every night.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
I'm not feeling it. Skip me.
Yeah. Okay.
For your comfort, I'll skip you.
Not in Dungeon World.
Yeah, not in Dungeon World.
Now you got a problem.
You're called on constantly, and there's no, even like if you've had a long day at work and you're just tired, there's no like passenger seat.
No.
In this, everybody's a driver, so it's always a little bit taxing. And the last thing, too, is kind of with that sort of group collaboration thing, is that it bets on that cooperation and the maturity of the group. It only functions if everyone plays in a considerate and mature way and, allows other people their turn, making sure that you're yes-anding what other people are doing, and, leaning into that inter-party role play of your character's bonds. If you're a selfish player, if you're a shy player, if you're a player that with mismanaged expectations may not only falter here, but you might actually bring the whole group down with you.
Yeah, there's a lot of demands on the players, more so than I would say pretty much any game. You've moved away from tabletop, and I think that's one of the first takeaways you have to take from this particularly, is that we are stepping away from the tabletop and sitting down on the couch.
Yeah.
You may lean to make a roll, but most of the game is going to be played relaxed, sitting back, and doing a lot more thinking.
Absolutely. So take us a little bit into Urban Shadows. I know it's a game that I like a lot from the sidelines.
Yes.
Again, never played it, but...
So first off, there are 2 editions now. Second edition's coming out soon. They've got a Kickstarter going right now.
I was today years old when I learned that.
I knew it was happening, but I almost missed out because for whatever reason, my Kickstarter flag did not go off. So I quickly got into that.
So perfect timing. If you like what we're about to talk about here, the Kickstarter is going right now.
Now, I learned about Urban Shadows first edition funny enough, from one of the collaborative creators. Magpie Games is co-owned by one of my friends. Well, more of acquaintance. I met her through another friend when we were playing 7th Sea 2nd Edition. And it was fun. It was neat. And then they shifted to Urban Shadows, and I got to play Urban Shadows for a little bit with them, and it was fantastic, and I got really excited about it. And then the world fell apart, and I wasn't able to connect back with them for quite some time. But then I see that there's this 2nd edition coming out. I was very excited. So imagine Urban Shadows, much like you said with D&D, it is the chillest game of World of Darkness ever. But it's not just World of Darkness, and that's the key, is that it's Dresden, it's World of Darkness, it's Underworld, it's Buffy, it's
October Day.
It falls under all of those categories because you have wizards and demons and fae and vampires and werewolves all playing in the same area.
And more. That's scratching the surface.
Correct. Ghosts and hunters and psychics and oracles. So it's a a hodgepodge of tropes of the underworld. And that's the whole idea is that urban shadows are what happens in the shadows. In fact, the game kind of says, don't play this during the day. The day is for the norms. Play it at night.
Oh, spooky.
This is our time. And so they want you to get into that mind frame that you are in a different set. And that's the whole thing about Urban Shadows is that this is the secret world that is obfuscated. It is the, goblin market that you have to know about to go there. But everybody who's in the underworld knows that. Everyone who's part of those shadows knows that.
If you know, you know.
Right. You don't cross the graveyard after 6 p.m. because the groundskeeper is undead and will kick you out, and the vampires will help. And so will the werewolves, even though they've hated each other for the last 60 years,
Because you just don't do that.
Right. So, and that's really where things start leaning is that Urban Shadows changes the script a little bit from Dungeon World in the sense that the city is a character that all of the group creates. So our little repartee there with Dungeon World is magnified. So when you sit down, the first thing you do as a group is create the city. Literally. You may pick a city, but you have a map of it. You have streets and areas and sectors. And you talk about where things exist, where you might exist, where powers, factions exist. And that's what determines what's the layout. The city itself is a commitment. And that's the key is that to play Urban Shadows, and they wrote this in the book, and I love the way they wrote this. Playing Urban Shadows requires discipline, a commitment to the moment at hand instead of the next 10 moments you want. The minute that you know where things are going is the moment that the story feels dead. Trust that you're going somewhere interesting. Play to find out what happens. The surprise is what's fun. And that's the truth. That's the core behind Urban Shadows.
And I think that's great because I think a lot of games, especially as players, you tend to try to play very defensively. And I don't want to be killed. I don't want to be put in a bad situation. So I'm going to play things very safe so things always work out for my character. And I think Urban Shadows is a setting right there, kind of encourages you to allow stuff to happen.
Yes. And it cuts down the minor pieces. It focuses on how the city is interacting with your character, what you're doing with the other characters, and how you're interacting with those factions within the city. And that is all creativity that works within the group. There is no, I'm doing this, and therefore you're doing that, and we're going to do this. It's, what's the discussion? Where are we going to the next scene? Why is this scene important? We're not talking about the minutia going on within a scene. I'm not going to go over the details with a crime investigator of what's going on in the scene. That's covered in discussion. It's quick. It's over. So it isn't until something's important that you have a scene and that moves come out of it. The key is that expectations are set, meaning, are your vampires interview with the vampires, or are they underworld vampires, or are they Dresden vampires? Those are all very different things, and people have different minds. So as a group, you decide what that is in your city. How does that happen, right? What makes them that way? And that's true for all of the things under the veil. But everyone knows that there aren't hidden flavors there. That's why it happens as an open discussion.
Knox in the Box says sparkle vampires.
Sure, you could have sparkle vampires. 100%.
Nope.
Nope. And right out of that. Okay.
All right.
So much like with Dungeon World, there are archetypes in this, and that is where these are the loosely defined tropes, for better term.
Right.
That define where you sit within the factions and what you are. So, for instance, you have mortals, which are human who are in the know. You have night, which covers your vampires, werewolves, and ghosts. You have power, which are people with gifts or magic or immortals.
So that's if you have fae and wizards and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then
Oracles.
You have yes. And then the wild are the demons that actually sit with the fae. And those are part of the realm beyond. So think of powers more of just magic, oracles, and immortals in general. Subsets of gods, if you will.
Yeah.
Stats are chosen very similar. They're very simple, and have an array that go from, I think you get 0, you get you get a -1, a 0, 2 +1s, and then you can throw a +1 on one of the other stats.
Yep.
So it's very simple. Factions, again, are defined by your archetype that sits within those, and there are a bunch of archetypes: Ghost, Hunter, Oracle, Vampire, Werewolf, or Wolf. And the idea is that everyone picks an archetype and no one duplicates. The idea is that we want you to be separate.
Yeah.
The moves are very very similar to Dungeon World, and there are moves for everything. There are your basic moves that everyone does, which includes I'm going to unleash an attack or turn to violence, effectively the same thing. Escape a situation, persuade an NPC, figure someone out, mislead, distract, or trick, and keep your cool or let it out. And let it out is you're basically using your energy, whether it's I'm doing wizardy stuff, I'm doing fae stuff.
I thought it was that song from that Disney movie.
You know what? It actually applies very well if you think about it.
Right.
And that's let it go. You have your factions and circle moves, which might be gathering information or learning about things within the city or affecting things, throwing rumors out. You have debt moves, and this is where you deal with your debts with other players. Now, that get established during the beginning of the game. So once your character creations, you then go and make debts with everyone.
Yeah, debts becomes kind of a major mechanic in Urban Shadows.
Very much so, because it is all about who you know and what they owe. And that is just a discussion. So, for instance, as I said, you go to the person next to you, and that person might be like, "All right, I need to have a debt of a bond. So I'm gonna say that Sara, you're vampire. I saved you from dying one night." And Sarah's like, "Okay, how? So now you work with me to tell me how that saving happened and why it was so important." And that's the way that those debts work at creation. I may have debts with factions as well. And again, your archetype determines how much your debts are and how they handled.
Right. And so therein, it's you kind of get the flavor of the game in that your dungeon world is very much your dungeon crawling adventurer lifestyle represented with Powered by the Apocalypse,
bonded to each other.
Whereas Urban Shadows is more of a political game of trading and buying off debts and stuff like that.
Very much so. It's much more political, much more social. It doesn't mean combat doesn't happen, but it's far more within that realm.
Hence the chillest game of World of Darkness you'll ever play.
Right. Your special moves are limited. If I remember correctly, there's only 4 special moves is the most that a player might have. And these are archetype specific. For instance, as a ghost, I might be able to, under Let It All Out, do something unique. And affect things in a different way than, say, a hunter might be able to, or a vampire might be able to.
Sure.
The last are the dramatic moves, which you kind of talked about with death on the Dungeon World. This is where corruption comes in, a corrupted move, and this is where, if I let it out, it affects corruption. It creates a corruption move.
It's kind of leaning into your darker nature and stuff like that.
If I'm taking care of somebody, the group may agree that it's an intimacy move, that it covers within that doing. Or I might be coming to an end. And there's an end move. And those dramatic moves are told to you how they will play out, basically. And you follow those. So if you meet certain criteria, this is what happens.
Yep.
Kind of a thing. Again, it doesn't change the narrative option where things can be narrated. It gives you the steps in that sense.
Yeah. Shows you how that should play out.
Right. So what makes Urban Shadows unique? One of the things that it does differently is framing of scenes. It talks about framing scenes and hard framing. Most scenes are just straight up discussions. Literally, it's the group talking about, hey, we need to really go invest, go talk about, our characters need to go talk about this because we're not together. We're not in the same space because you don't work as a team as some of the other games. You might be in very different places. So you might come to a common ground to do a scene, right? And so the group kind of discusses like, oh, well, wouldn't you guys meet up at, Tony's club? No. That's where the vampires hang out. We'll probably end up having to do it back at your apartment. Right. Okay. So we all meet at the apartment, and now there's a scene at the apartment.
Just there.
That's it. There's hard framing, which is where the MC, the Master of Ceremonies, kind of comes through and says what's pushing something. So, for instance, you might be meeting with somebody, but maybe on the way there, maybe on the way out, or where you guys go, something's going on. So now the MC has stepped in to kind of push the story forward in that direction. But it doesn't allow, like, the reason why they're there, the MC might have, but it also means that you have the players being flexible about how they come in, what changes, what else is going on within that scene. Again, it sets those little fleeting moments off to the side and only gets you back to the meat of the story.
Yes.
When those moments have to happen.
Which is nice because it's cut so much chaff out of the story. Honestly,
it really does. It takes all of the pittance NPCs and kind of throws them out the door, so that you're left with just the meat and potatoes of the story.
And it really does kind of take it up to that level. Like it reinforces the idea that you are, a supernatural. You're on the level of the supernatural, whether you're a mortal in the know,
right,
or one of the supernatural there.
Right.
It really kind of sets the story, it frames it around the supernatural, so that like any of the mortals that aren't really in the know, it's like shut up for the tens are talking,
Exactly. And that's it really does put you in that frame constantly.
Yeah.
What it does do well is that it is a fast-paced RP noir. Like, without a doubt, players can quickly get right into telling stories, and there's very little that blocks play.
Yep.
You're just right into it.
Yep.
It appears complicated, in all honesty. Like, from an onset, all these moves, all these things that are in there. Once you step into it, it is very simple to just talk.
Yeah.
And creativity just pushes the story through, and then every once in a while the storyteller and or the player say, hey, I think we need to make a move on that.
Yeah,
I don't know how this is going to work out.
I think that was the biggest hurdle for me, at least reading through both the Dungeon World and the Urban Shadows rulebooks, was that it does look like a big list of moves, and like, oh god, I've got to memorize all these moves. Well, first off, you don't, because there's a quick reference sheet. But
right.
Second off, just let the fiction happen.
Yeah.
And then when somebody kind of speaks up, whether it's the Master of Ceremonies or whether it's one of the players, says, maybe we should make a move for that?
Yeah.
Someone can kind of go, oh yeah, actually I've got a move that triggers off of doing exactly what we're doing right now. Let's try that, You roll some dice, you find out what the narrative, what the rules say about how the narrative continues, and...
That's it. You move on.
And the fiction just keeps rolling.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think where it stumbles is some interesting points. One... Starting players and Master Ceremony are going to get caught up in the nuance of the moves. I think any players who are new to this are going to think that those are hard rules and step into that and kind of lose track of the storytelling.
Yeah, especially if you're coming from something very codified like D&D.
Right, and that's a huge step to try and get over. The other part of it is that the players have to be into it. They have to be invested. They have to be disciplined to respond and to work with the MC and each other. If you're not in the story, like if you're just not feeling it, like you're having a bad day, like you said, this game falls apart instantaneously.
Yep.
Like it is not even a side thing, and you feel it. Everyone feels it. And like literally, you can play with less players. And so the storyteller might just be like, hey, maybe just not.
Maybe just sit out tonight.
Yeah. And you become a spectator and add nothing to the story. I could easily see, without a number of players who are active and in it, that this game could die and feel very, very small. And I think spectating, to a degree, creates a problem within itself, because now players who are characters in the game aren't playing and literally start to fade because they're seeing these other players do more and more and more, and that might drift them away. So I think it's a challenging game that you have to be disciplined and ready for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Players help create the sessions. And literally one of the things they talk about is when you step into a new session, one of the suggestions they give you is you roll for the faction. So, for instance, your player's just like, okay, it's the beginning of the session. What are you doing, Sara? Well, I'm going to go and I got to go talk to the vampires about this holy relic that got stolen because I think they know. Oh, so you're going to go gather information. Yeah. All right, let's do a faction roll on that to start with to see how well this story is going to go tonight. And you roll and you get a 3. Well, we both know that the story is going to go in a not so great direction tonight.
Oh.
Yeah. And so unless you're prepared to talk about what you're doing, the storyteller's not there to guide you through the story.
Yeah.
They're there to listen to what your character wants to do and then to tell you how the city reacts. That's it. It's very sandboxy in that. And so there's a lot of demands there. Finally, an MC or a master of ceremonies, in the case the storyteller, who is unprepared to just have the setting and a loose idea of the story is going to find themselves trying to hard railroad, and it is going to be felt quickly.
You're gonna be fighting your players the entire time because they've got so much control over the narrative,
right?
And you're gonna be playing tug of war the entire time with the plot,
right? And that's a challenge.
Yeah,
that is a critical difference between it and City of Mists.
Yeah, absolutely.
City of Mists is an investigation story where the MC knows the mystery, and you're involved in it. This is very much you're telling the story with them.
Yeah, what's going on in the city tonight, boys?
Right.
And
then they're filling in the gaps. Like, you could go too far as a player to say that you know that the vampires has stolen this artifact and are hiding it within their enclave, and, the wizards group, is just finding out about it because they're going to use it for this great ritual. Okay, great. That's a lot of detail. Wonderful. You just created half the story. You just created most of the story. There's still things you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know the true motivations of any one of the players in there. And that's where the MC has to fill in the gaps and do it relatively fast.
Yeah, it's a lot of improv. It's a lot of thinking on your feet for the storyteller. So that's be ready for a workout, man.
It is a mental workout, but at the same time, it's very enjoyable.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's fun to watch a group who knows each other and knows the type of character interactions that they're going to do, and it becomes very, very much caricatures of the moments, and that makes for a different time. Plus, it allows for a lot of creative juices to flow, and that makes it good, but at the same time makes it very demanding. So, I would say for anybody going into Urban Shadows, be prepared for the group that you've got and set your expectations as the MC to a level that's acceptable. Because you may be like, oh, everybody's got to be super creative and we got to do all these things and we got to do this, and they may not be ready for that.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, I just wanted to play a fae in this city. I don't know what's going on, and I don't have anything to add. Like, that's not necessarily going to work very well.
Well, but at the same time, though, you got to kind of allow the wiggle room for people to warm up to that playstyle, I suppose.
Exactly.
So Knox in the Box in the live chat is asking, like, do you bring ringers with different playstyles for newbies to see? Let them decide what playstyle fits them better?
I would say, for me, don't necessarily bring a ringer to play something. Bring a ringer to ask questions and to help with bringing the improv together.
Yeah,
I think that's where the value will come.
And I think it's less valuable to have a ringer that just plays as an example, but rather tries to engage the newbies to get them involved and learning and playing and seeing it for themselves.
Yeah, and with this game, it's less about the rules and more about the improv and story creation.
Yeah,
that you need your people to move to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
like the rules almost seem secondary.
Yeah, kind of
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they should feel very organic in what you're doing. So, you want to hit questions?
Yeah, let's hit some questions.
Okay,
we got 10 minutes left. It's a nice tidy time for it.
Yeah.
So Overwatch asks, based on the unique aspects of the Powered by the Apocalypse system, is there a particular setting or genre of game you think would be well suited to it that hasn't been explored yet?
You said Dresden.
Well, no, because Dresden is represented. You can play Urban Shadows in the Dresden Files setting almost entirely out of the box.
That's true.
We were discussing this a little bit before the podcast started. I think it's like you need to basically make demons a restricted class. Like you can't play demons because they're very rare and very special in the Dresden verse.
But I would say that it gives you a sandbox to be able to stretch those feet, which is something that isn't available necessarily.
That's true. You might be able to find some sort of lesser demon, maybe that isn't a Denarian, if you know the setting. But and that the Fae are very focused on winter and summer courts, and there's really not like a court mechanic in a Seelie or unseelie mechanic in for the Fae in this. So it's a consideration.
Yeah.
If you really wanted to be like faithful to the Dresden setting, but I digress. It's represented. It's very well represented. So the question is, what particular setting or genre do you think would be well suited to that hasn't been explored?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is we're still thinking very terrestrial, and there's nothing to say that you couldn't do Urban Shadows in a sci-fi setting. Exactly. You could easily do a moon base or a Mars base where stuff is happening differently, and that's an effect. It helps condense it.
I don't know if I would do like Urban Shadows out there. Like I just think I would make use the core Apocalypse setting for just a space game, just in general.
Yeah, to simplify.
Like, make Powered by the Apocalypse Traveler.
Oh yeah.
Or
Spelljammer.
Yeah, Spelljammer would be great. Something out there. I know there are a few space games that I saw in the list of on that wiki of those 24 games that were out there. But the only space games were very specific. Like one of them where you played artificial intelligences that had their own ships and such like that, which is neat. But I don't think any of them really captured that like Firefly-esque, we're a ragtag band of whatever, out in the world with nothing but the black and our ship.
Yeah.
And we're just going to do crew things out here and have adventures amongst the stars.
Yeah, I think Powered by the Apocalypse would be a good engine for stuff like Stargate or where you're traveling and it's more about the narrative and the unknown.
Yeah. It could be. I mean, it really depends on how tactical you want to be about things like that. Like Stargate, I might want to run in something more like Savage Worlds.
Okay.
There is actually a Stargate role-playing game that's coming out. It's either in Kickstarter now or its Kickstarter has just recently closed.
Okay.
But the SG-1 role-playing game, and it was uses actually the D&D 5th edition rules.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but of course, heavily modified to fit the setting.
The other one that kind of hits me is a return kind of to adventure with something like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
That could be cool.
That takes away that whole power aspect that Adventure and Aeon Society kind of throws at you, and giving you this mix between a tactical game and
quasi-super-powered characters,
Whereas this kind of puts it back onto the story. Yeah. Stories like The Mummy and things like that, where it's less about the combat, because that's not the heavy mechanic. It's more about what's really going on.
Oh, there we go. Actually, Knox was nice enough to link it in our live chat, the SG-1 role-playing game by Excellent. Wyvern Gaming.
Okay.
And let me see here. I'm clicking on it to see if it's still open. It's successfully funded.
Excellent.
It looks like it's closed.
Okay. Well, I'm still certain that you could probably go in the right places to get it.
But I think the big takeaway from the discussion, though, is that any game setting or any story that you're going to tell with Powered by the Apocalypse behind it as the rule system is going to end up being focused on the narrative.
Very much so. That
broad step away from your tactical, crunchy gameplay.
Right. If you have creative people who need a rules-light system to just tell a good story, I think it's a great way to go.
Yep.
I think that there are definite pros and cons to it, but I think you could adapt very quickly to make it a campfire type of story, or any number of events that require less mechanics to be thrown around.
Yeah, absolutely.
But more just mind's eye. One of the first things that I think about that this kind of leans into, which we discussed, is I think that if you had people who were very creative but maybe had physical limitations, maybe they're blind, physically blind, the player is, or has ailments where they can't necessarily get to a table, this is a perfect type of game to be playing over Discord.
Yeah.
Or FAR or some tele-gaming system where you've got the ability to let your mind run and be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let creatives be creative with just a few set expectations. Yeah, I think it's perfect for that kind of stuff.
All right.
So,
You get the next question?
Oh, yes. Let me get back to that. What is running the world behind the scenes like? For example, do you schedule world events to happen whether your players know about them or not? Can you make worlds operate on a rigid timetable? I think you can, but I think in my mind, is it important?
Yeah. Now, to clarify, this is Knox in the Box. I asked him if he meant just gaming in general or if he meant Powered by the Apocalypse, and he did clarify this is gaming in general.
Yes.
So this is not an Apocalypse World specific question, but yeah, I mean, running the world behind the scenes. I think I echo Rob on this one. You can, but you need what you need to figure out is how much micromanagement is important.
Right.
So, yeah, you can have things scheduled, but I think, again, things that are dramatically appropriate, you want to make sure that your players are aware that those things are happening and that they can do something about them, because what you don't want to do is, schedule things to happen in the background, like, your big bad evil guy's secret plot or something like that, right?
Right.
But then not tell the players about enough information to be able to get involved with it.
Right.
So then one day you just spring on them, oh, well, the castle blows up.
Exactly. Don't set predetermined timers that after my third campaign, after my third session, this is going to happen. After my sixth session, this is going to happen. Or after they've gone through 1 month of in-game travel, this is going to happen, and it's a blood moon and whatever.
Yeah.
Move the story along as it needs to be. If there is a moment in time that they need to hit, for instance, you're like, I'm thinking of something like that Avatar: Last Airbender, where it's like, oh, the meteor's going to be coming on, during the blood moon. Okay, well, when's the blood moon? It's going to happen in 2 fortnights. Okay, well, you now have a time marker to hit. How do you move the story to meet the marker?
Right.
I would do that. Now, on the other hand, having special events happen at a certain time, sure. Knowing certain times a year so that the players are like, hey, is there like a festival this time of year? You're going to be like, yeah, actually there is. There's a festival during this section of the year. It's the Harvest Festival. It's, supports this god. Yeah,
very, very doable. I think of it for me, mostly running behind the scenes is a lot of just looking at how the players have done things in the world, and then thinking, how would the world react to that?
Exactly.
And then kind of altering the world in relation to their move.
Yeah.
And then just going from there. So then next time they interact with it, it's changed.
Correct.
Because of how they've done things.
Yeah.
But then, you've got your own major players. So, I've got, lieutenants and the Poppy King himself changing things in that environment. So there's a little give and pull there.
Yeah.
But none of it's really on a strict table. It's mostly just looking at action and reaction and just adjusting how I think things should be.
Yeah. So next week we're going to return to our mini-series discussion we're going to focus on puzzle encounters. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, on Instagram at @ST_conclave. Mixlr is where our people are hearing us live right now on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. at mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. You can find our Discord link on our Twitter posts. We usually put it up there. Or you can find it at our website, storytellerconclave.com.
I want to thank our Patreon members as always, Knox in the Box, Sam, Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, and all the rest of you. Thank you so much for contributing to the show every week. We really appreciate all your great contributions. Our pre-show music is actually by Arcane Anthems. You can find them at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. That is, you can find that at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. And our outro music, which you're hearing now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/tracks.
We'd like to thank our families, Vicky, Sean. Thank you so much for assisting us every time on doing these things. All of our friends out there who have helped us play our games and run with us, and you, our listeners.
We love you.
Love you. Good night.
Good night.